I never imagined I'd have a story this wild to tell. When I married Michael 10 years back, I pictured a life that was stable, safe, maybe even a touch predictable. And honestly, I was fine with that. He was my college sweetheart, the kind of guy who was always punctual, opened doors for me, paid the bills, and spoke with a steady tone. We moved into a cozy house in a quiet Ohio neighborhood, adopted a golden retriever named Max, and tried for kids until our hopes faded. Life settled into familiar patterns, and for a time, I cherished the simple routine. I worked part-time as a speech therapist for young children, while Michael held a demanding job as a senior logistics manager at a tech company. His role was high pressure, but he rarely let it show in a way that raised alarms. He'd come home, plant a quick kiss on my cheek, ask about my day, then disappear into his laptop or phone for hours. I figured he was just decompressing from work stress. Looking back, I see the reality was far different. It started with small clues. One night, as I went to plug in my phone, I noticed Michael's charger wasn't in its usual spot. I looked around and saw his phone wasn't on the kitchen counter where he typically left it. No big deal, I thought, maybe he took it upstairs. But the habit grew. His phone, once casually left face up, was now always face down, its screen dimmed so I couldn't catch a glimpse. It might seem trivial, but after a decade together, those tiny shifts scream like red flags. One day, I gently asked if he was okay or if work was getting to him. He gave me a warm smile and said, "Don't worry, babe. Just swamped with deadlines." But then his business trips ramped up, conferences, he said, with overnight stays in cities a few hours away. At first, I believed him, even packed his bags and tucked little notes in his pockets. But one evening, after he left for what he called a team retreat in Indianapolis, I got a strange Instagram message from an anonymous account. It simply said, "You deserve better." The profile was private, with no posts, and when I tried to respond, it was gone. A lump lodged in my throat and wouldn't leave. Sleep eluded me that night. At dawn, I called the hotel he was supposedly at. No record of Michael. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it could be a mistake. Maybe he was at another hotel and I'd mixed up the name. But a gut-wrenching instinct told me otherwise. The next night, he strolled in, all grins, kissing my forehead and handing me a bag of caramel-coated pecans from a local shop. I thanked him, playing along, masking my growing unease. But that moment changed me. I became a quiet observer, noting every detail. I started photographing stray texts or receipts he left out. I scoured our bank statements, tracking every odd transaction, and built a hidden spreadsheet. There were charges for unfamiliar restaurants, reservations at boutique hotels in towns he had no reason to visit. One entry jumped out, a spa in Springfield. He'd always claimed he despised massages. I kept my doubts under wraps. I still made his morning coffee, still ironed his shirts. But when he was out late for work or grabbing drinks with friends, I was piecing together a puzzle he never expected me to solve. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Thursday. He mentioned a client dinner with 2 colleagues, including a guy named Ryan, who he'd brought up before. I nodded, gave him a quick peck, and waited exactly 30 minutes before slipping out. I drove to his office, parked across the street, and saw his car still there. I waited. 3 hours later, he walked out, not alone. She was tall, probably in her late 20s, with sleek auburn hair and a laugh that carried across the street. She hooked her arm through his, and he didn't pull away. I stayed in my car, silent, watching them slide into a cab together. I didn't follow. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, a heavy chill settling deep inside me. The next morning, I told him I was visiting my sister in Columbus for the weekend. He kissed me goodbye without a hint of suspicion. I drove to her place, but I wasn't there to relax. I spilled every detail. And she said something I'll never forget. Staring into my eyes, she asked, "Are you after revenge, or are you looking for closure?" In that moment, I couldn't separate the two. All I knew was I wanted him to feel the same gut-punching betrayal I did. I wanted him to question everything, to lose his footing, to hurt, not physically, but in a way that shakes your very soul, just as mine was shaken. Over the next few weeks, I became someone he'd never suspect. I stopped asking questions, stopped prodding. I started playing a sharper, long-term game. I got a burner phone he didn't know about and began texting him as a stranger, a fake profile, a new name, a tale of a woman new to town, curious and a bit lonely. It took less than a week for him to respond, and under 2 for him to start flirting. He had no idea it was me. I wanted to push his boundaries, to see how far he'd go. So, I set up a meeting at a quaint bookstore cafe, a spot he'd never take me. I said I'd wear a blue scarf. From my car across the street, I watched him walk in, scan the room, and sit waiting for a woman who didn't exist. I stayed put. My pulse raced, hands trembled, but I didn't show. After 20 minutes, he left, checking his phone like he'd been ditched. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt nauseated, but this was far from done. That night, he came home grumpy, blaming a headache. I offered him water and a soft smile. I wanted him to wonder why I wasn't prying, why I wasn't suspicious. The quieter I became, the more uneasy he seemed. That was my goal. I started pulling back, not emotionally, but tactically. I siphoned money into a secret account. I consulted a lawyer. I collected every email, photo, receipt, and message. I anonymously tipped off his company's HR about potential workplace misconduct. I requested his firm's travel logs, public records, if you know where to look. Slowly, the perfect husband facade he'd built began to crack. Still, I stayed silent. I wanted him to confess, to trap himself in his own lies. But he didn't. He kept weaving stories, even suggesting a romantic getaway for us, as if a weekend could patch the gaping wound he'd inflicted. So, I agreed, saying, "Sure, let's go to Colorado." I told him, we can hike, sip hot cocoa, and reconnect. But I had a different plan, one that would leave him exposed, humiliated, and shattered. That's where this part of the story pauses. What I did next didn't just undo him. It redefined who I am. And I have no regrets. I played my role to perfection. You'd have thought I was the devoted wife, eager for a fresh start. Michael suggested a week away in a peaceful, restorative place, like he'd skimmed some self-help blog. I smiled and said I'd always wanted to see Aspen. The irony almost made me laugh. The next few weeks were a blur of trip planning, shopping for gear, and pretending to browse cabins while I'd already booked a rental under my name, separate from what he believed we'd reserved. I got him involved, asking his input as if it mattered. I even let him choose the hiking trails, knowing we'd never hike them together. All the while, I worked in secret. When he went to the gym or left for client meetings, I dug through our bank records, noting every unexplained cash withdrawal, every vague Venmo payment marked with a goofy emoji. I found photos in a hidden phone album, screenshots he thought he'd deleted, but his cloud backup betrayed him. One showed her lounging on a hotel bed, wearing his hoodie. Another was a grainy selfie, probably taken in the back of a car. He looked so smug, so pleased with himself. The hurt dulled. When I saw his hand cupping her chin in one photo, something clicked, not pain, not sadness, but resolve. And still, I said nothing. The trip began like any other. We flew into Denver, rented a Jeep, and drove into the mountains with soft jazz playing in the background. He held my hand while driving, like we were newlyweds again. I let him. He had no clue I'd already mailed a package to the cabin, a hard drive loaded with every file, screenshot, and bank statement, a safeguard in case I needed to expose everything. We arrived at the cabin, a cozy retreat nestled among towering pines. It felt like the kind of place you'd dream of retiring to, but only with someone who truly cherished you. Michael started a fire, poured us wine, and toasted to new beginnings. I clinked my glass against his, watching him drink, my face a portrait of serenity. The next morning, I casually mentioned I needed some alone time to journal by the lake. Michael nodded, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, and said he'd take a short nap. That was my cue. I hopped into the Jeep and drove to the real cabin I'd rented just outside town. Waiting there was someone Michael didn't even know existed, Ethan. Ethan was a private investigator, not the stereotypical gumshoe, but a meticulous former cybersecurity pro with a talent for getting things right. My sister had connected me with him 2 months earlier, and I'd brought him on because he'd helped women like me before, women who needed proof and, more importantly, a plan. He had everything ready, a detailed timeline linking Michael's deceptions to specific dates, hotel bookings, and even security footage. At first, watching him walk hand in hand with that same woman across different cities, once even near our own neighborhood, twisted my gut. But now, I was thankful for the clarity. The illusion was gone. Ethan handed me a flash drive loaded with encrypted files and videos. "This has it all," he said. "If he tries to spin a story, this shuts him down. Your divorce attorney will love it." Divorce. The word still felt strange in my mouth. I nodded. Let him think I'm still his. That evening, I returned to the cabin like nothing had happened. Michael had made some chile and was scrolling through VRBO for our next vacation. I smiled, gushed about the lake's serenity, and curled up beside him under a blanket that no longer felt comforting. For the next few days, I played my role with Oscar-worthy finesse. I laughed at his quips, asked about his colleagues, even listened patiently to a drawn-out story about his coworker's new puppy. Every fiber of me wanted to scream, to chuck his phone into the fire, to erase that smug look as he thought he was winning me back. But I wasn't here to lose my cool. I was here to take him apart. The day before we were set to head back, I suggested we take some pictures together to celebrate this fresh start. He was all for it. We drove to a stunning lookout with a wooden platform and sweeping mountain vistas. I set up the tripod, angled the phone just right, and pressed record, not for a memory, but to capture a moment of brutal truth. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, I turned to him and asked, "Do you love me?" He looked confused for a second, then smiled. Of course, I do. Have you ever cheated, Michael? His uneasy laugh gave him away. What's this about? I need to know, I pressed. I want to trust you. He glanced away for a moment. Never. Not even with her? His face went pale. Not even the woman from Springfield, I went on, or the one from Louisville? The one in your office? His jaw clenched. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you do, I said, calm as stone. And it's all recorded now. Your lie, right there. That's all I needed. He reached for the phone, but I was faster, stepping back and keeping it out of his grasp. You might want to sit down, Michael. There's more coming. He stared at me like I was a stranger, as if I'd morphed into something he couldn't comprehend. And maybe I had. I was no longer the trusting, quiet wife he'd fooled for years. I was someone who'd spent months crafting this precise moment. I pulled an envelope from my coat. This has everything, your texts, her photos, your travel records. I also sent a copy to your company's ethics committee. His face drained of color. You did what? They don't look kindly on workplace misconduct, do they? Especially with someone who reports to you. What's her name again? Lauren. The one you were mentoring. He opened his mouth, then closed it. And if you think you can turn this on me, know I've already met with a sharp lawyer. One word from me, and she files. You'll lose the house, the savings, and your reputation. You're bluffing, he muttered. Try me. We stood in silence. The breeze rustling through the pines. He looked like a man whose life had imploded in minutes. And it had. Back at the cabin, he begged for a chance to explain. He called it a phase, said he felt neglected, swore the other women were meaningless. I listened, expressionless, then handed him another envelope. This one laid out my terms: sign the divorce papers quietly, give up the house, and walk away without a fight, or I'd go public. He signed within days. But I wasn't done. One of the women he'd been seeing had no idea he was married. I reached out to her carefully, keeping my tone kind. Her name was Jessica, a graphic designer who thought Michael was single. She broke down when I told her the truth, then offered to support me in court if needed. I didn't need her testimony, but her solidarity meant everything. She wasn't the villain in my story, just another person he'd tricked. Michael's collapse was quiet but complete. His company launched an investigation, and 2 weeks later, he was encouraged to resign. HR called it a mutual decision, but we both knew the reality. He moved into a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. Whispers spread among his friends, though I never said a word. I didn't need to. I kept the house, Max, and found calm. More than anything, I found perspective. I thought revenge would feel fiery, but it didn't. It felt like freedom. That liberation was worth every careful step I took. But the story doesn't stop there. Sometimes, when a man like Michael hits rock bottom, he doesn't quit, he digs deeper. What he tried next was a whole new chapter, one I didn't expect, but I was ready for. I thought it was over. I believed I'd walked away from the wreckage, leaving Michael buried in it. I was wrong. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, anonymous messages started appearing. They were vague, taunting lines like, think you're safe, and watch your back. At first, I brushed them off, maybe a bitter friend of Michael's, or even him hiding behind a fake profile. But then my credit card was declined at the grocery store. Humiliated, I called the bank and learned someone had tried to open 2 new cards in my name. That's when I knew Michael wasn't done. Far from it. He'd lost the house, his job, and most of his friends. But some men don't just fall apart. They strike back, they plot, and they try to pull you down with them. I had a choice: back off or finish this. I chose to fight. I contacted Ethan again. He wasn't surprised. "He's trying to rattle you," Ethan said. Textbook narcissist tactic. He can't control you anymore, so he's trying to scare you. But I wasn't scared. I was furious. We set up credit alerts, secured my accounts, and installed cameras around my home. Ethan also taught me how to trace messages from unknown senders, just in case Michael slipped up. It didn't take long. One night, a message came: "Enjoy that house while you have it." I stayed calm. By morning, Ethan had traced the IP to a coffee shop on the west side, one Michael used to frequent. Security footage confirmed it. There he was, slouched over a laptop in a corner, a ghost of the man I once knew. That was enough. I compiled the evidence, his threats, the IP logs, the attempted identity theft, and filed for a restraining order. It was granted. He was barred from coming within 500 feet of me. He fought it, of course, claiming I was making it all up, calling me vindictive. But the judge wasn't convinced, especially after seeing the footage and messages. For the second time, Michael left court beaten. Yet I still wasn't finished. Weeks later, I ran into Jessica again, the woman he'd deceived. She'd moved on, started dating someone new. Over coffee, we chatted, and that brief conversation gave me closure I didn't know I needed. "You pulled me out of his web," she said. I'd have kept believing him. "No," I told her. "You saved yourself. I just showed you the truth." After that, I stopped tracking Michael, stopped asking mutual friends for updates. I let him fade into the past where he belonged. I threw myself into my work, started volunteering at a local shelter, and took long walks with Max. My life felt simple again. But not suffocating, peaceful, but not boring. One afternoon, I stood on my porch, looking at the garden Michael had promised but never started. I'd built it myself: tulips, lavender, and a few sturdy roses finally taking root. I realized then that revenge isn't always loud and explosive. Sometimes it's a quiet morning, an empty inbox, a full gas tank, and no one to betray you. Sometimes it's just peace. And peace after chaos is the sweetest victory of all.